Thanks for listening to the Wayback Chronicles podcast. My name is Noel Kurse. I'm here with Keith Abbott and Steve McKelkey. In this podcast, we talk about the greatest events that have happened since the 1970s to the present.
And if you recall, the Wayback Time Machine chose the year 1992 as the year we were to visit next.
And in this episode, Keith is going to be bringing you the greatest of technology from 1992. So Keith, I know you got some great stuff on tap.
So I thought it'd be kind of fun to do something different and go back to some of the technology that was available in 1992 as far as hardware, sound cards, and some of the ability to record. And so over the next podcast, what I'm going to try to do is record this session as it would sound using the tools of 1992. So here we go in 3, 2, 1.
Walk us through the technology advancements.
Sure will. It's really fun to see because we've covered the 88 technology, we've covered the 95 technology, and now we're bridging the gap with 92. Mm-hmm. And it was fun to research because really it's amazing. This is the time where things are starting to explode. And there's starting to be so many things out there that they're having to come up with standards of care and all those sort of things to make sure things are going to work right. So this was a really fun year. There were some neat things introduced that are commonplace now. Hard to believe they were never there before. So I've got some dates that we'll go through in order. Some are just neat events and sayings that happened in certain times. So let's get into it. And the first thing that happened was, and we talked about the ousting of Steve Jobs last technology in 1988, and John Sculley was the CEO for Apple during 1992, and he became obsessed with portable devices for Apple to kind of take them into a different direction from the Mac. They were trying to get rid of the Mac and all of that. I guess they were jealous of what Steve was doing. So anyway, he was the first person on January 7th at the Consumer Electronics Show to introduce the term PDA. And it was a PDA that Apple introduced. Do you all recall the name of the first PDA that Apple came out with? It was called
the Apple Newton.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Nice.
I thought it was very, very clever to have the name Newton after an apple. Pretty
Yeah.
cool. But it was a bomb by all considerable circumstances. It was a neat idea that wasn't ready quite yet, And so, but that was the first term. We talked about PDA, I believe, in the 95 technology with some of the different ones that were out. But that was the first time it was coined and the product that it was coined by.
I'm looking at the Apple Newton. I mean, it looks very similar to the Palm Pilot in shape, size, screen.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Palm Pilot took off in 95. So
Yeah.
Just one of those systems that really wasn't ready for its time. Like the market has got to be able to understand what the product is and how it can be used and how it can be used to better their lives and stuff like that. Otherwise, they look at it and they're like, I have no idea what the heck I'm supposed to do with this thing, and
Right.
they just don't even engage it because they, it's just not obviously the market didn't adopt it because it just it's kind of ahead of its time. But
yeah. So I remember about, was it MP4 or MP3 that came first? But
3.
So like when the MP3 players came out, that was like mid 90s, I think. And so like people don't understand, well, why do I need this? And so I remember working at Office Depot at the time. We started selling all these and sold these different speakers, and they didn't sell. They just sat there and we had to dust them. And then, they went away, and then, 10 years later, then they started to take off. But of course, with the Apple iPod, whatever it's called. Yep. So
iPod, and just Napster music sharing and all of that. All of that stuff is really where let's save these things. I don't need to have a booklet of CDs anymore,
Yeah.
So there were some pros and cons with that, obviously with piracy and all that kind of stuff. But I think that was really where file sharing started getting popular. And hey, I need to save these, So pretty wild. But yep, like you say, not ready for prime time. That's all it was.
Absolutely.
But an idea that somebody shoved in the back of their head and saying, okay, someday we're gonna use this tool and enhance it and make it better. Pretty wild.
Yep.
And not to be outdone by Apple, April 6th, I think, is a pretty significant time because this was when Microsoft introduced Windows 3.1.
Oh,
So
wow.
we talked about MS-DOS, Noel. You had mentioned that it was nothing to write home about, if you remember, in the technology of 1988. So this was the first actual Windows mouse-based, really solid platform. There were some others. There was a 3.0, but this was the one that really rolled it into mainstream. And there were a couple of reasons for that. And the first reason was really to have the ability to give this out in mass. So this was actually the first software that was introduced that was able to be distributed on CD-ROM for an operating system. So that was kind of neat. Did you all have 3.1, or which one do you remember going back on your computers?
Gosh.
Yeah, I remember 3.1 way back in the day.
Yeah.
An interesting factoid about 3.1 was the first year that this is the first time that screensavers were ever introduced
That's
to
right.
an operating system. So it's kind of an interesting little thing that they added in there for the first time ever. Screensavers made an entrance into the world.
Was that the bouncing Windows logo?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
And yeah, it's funny. Adobe also it was really mostly working with Apple at the time, and this was the first time they introduced Type Manager. So Adobe Type Manager introduced things that we deal with all the time. Arial font, Courier New, and Times New Roman was introduced in this time.
Wow.
So crazy. And also, you talked about Microsoft Bob, if you remember, Steve.
Yeah.
Right. So it was actually supposed to be introduced in 3.1, but they didn't have it completely ready yet. So it wasn't introduced till 95 during your year, so that you talked about. And then also Steve's favorite game ever was introduced in Windows 3.1, and he posted this on our Facebook page, and that was the game Minesweeper. So Minesweeper was also a part of this, along with Solitaire, that was part of the 3.1 package. So we all know how much we love that game, and I don't think to this day any of us know how to play it.
Yeah,
So.
I don't think I ever played that game more than 2 minutes at a time. But, I don't even know if I ever achieved success with that game, but yeah.
I think I did until I played and finished one, and I was like, okay, I don't have to ever play this again. Noel, you were saying something. Sorry.
I remember playing Solitaire on my old computer, and when you finish the game of Solitaire, the cards come cascading out, into the different four stacks or whatever. And I remember watching how slow those cards would bounce across the screen. And I remember playing that on a friend, actually on Linda's computer. She had a much faster processor than my old computer, because I finished that and the cards went shooting across the screen. I'm like, what the heck was that? Just shows the difference. Yeah, the difference in speed of processor. But
even back then, power was king.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Pretty wild. Yeah, that was a good one. And also in November of that year, they did some enhancements to 3.1 to try to compete with Apple's QuickTime. Windows introduced the Windows Windows for Video, or Video for Windows is what it was called. So trying to compete in the video front, which we all know to this day is responsible for all the TikTok that we have to deal with nowadays, but that's okay. So, but anyway, good stuff. So yeah, so there was a lot going on between IBM, Apple, and Microsoft, and you could start seeing a lot of things going back and forth between them. So we'll get to more of that in a little bit. So this was an interesting one. So a group called the Joint Photographic Expert Group decided that they needed to create a set of rules. And these rules were what was going to be able to create images that could be shared in all of the different types of computers, whether it be Apple computers, whether it be Windows computers, whether it be Unix, codec, not codec, but Unix or any of those systems. And so the Joint Photographic Expert Group, or JPEG was completely formed at that point. So that started in 1992. I can't imagine a world without JPEG files. Can you believe? That's wild. So
and now you know what JPEG actually stands for. So Joint Photographic Experts Group.
Yeah, I had no idea. Did you know that? Noel, you probably knew that. I did not.
I did know that. Okay. Unfortunately, I didn't know
that. Yeah. That's just crazy. It's funny to hear these things, because you just figure like somebody came up with this and it's because of a color code or something. So it's really interesting to hear some of the names and how they come up with these things.
Yeah.
So
each know that in that meeting they were talking we've established all these rules and standards by which multimedia pictures will be handled. And then the last order of business, like, what the heck are we going to call this thing? We're like, let's just call it us.
Yeah.
JPEG.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Good.
Sure.
Yeah, I like it.
There's a pompous.
Yeah, really. Could have called it anything like, I don't know, picture, photo, or anything that actually makes sense. But JPEG, sure, why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And as a not more coincidental follow up, Photoshop decided to be distributed not only from Apple but to Microsoft and Windows based computers too. So
Yep.
images were happening back then.
Yes, they
So
were.
that's a good thing. So yeah, interesting JPEG. So I learned something new while I was researching this.
Just to kind of go back to the Windows 3.1. So Windows 3.0, actually Windows was the first one of the. It's kind of overlooked from all the other advancements that were introduced in Windows, but the file manager was probably um, the biggest advancement really in like computer technology, because before, like if you had DOS, if you had to move a file from one file to another or from one folder to another or do anything like file manipulation or file movement on a computer, you had to issue all sorts of commands and everything to make that happen. But in the file manager, all you had to do, like they'd introduce drag and drop, like you could just take a group of files, copy paste it into another folder, and like it eliminated so many different commands that you had to like issue to DOS in order to make that file operation happen. So just that one application, just the file manager itself was like mind blowing.
Revolutionary.
It really
Yeah.
was. But anyway, just
Things that you take for granted every day,
totally,
I was
totally.
afraid
Wow.
Noel was going to bring up GUI again. I was like, oh,
I know.
I'm going to have to get a chocolate chip cookie after this.
I'm like, I've got them in the oven.
I'll drop that whenever the time is right. Just trust me. It's the episode is young.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. We've got time.
Stay tuned.
Yes.
So speaking of graphical user interface, in November, IBM, again, not trying to be outdone. In fact, this was the year that IBM decided to spin off an organization called the IBM Personal Computer Company, which was dedicated solely to the development of personal computing devices. And so they came out with a bunch of different things. One of them was that they actually, in November of this year, created the first smartphone with a touchscreen. And it was being able to be used as a mobile phone or a PDA. And this was called Simon. So I had never heard of Simon. Have you all heard of Simon before?
I had
No.
not.
No, I hadn't either. So that was interesting to me, something new. And so I thought that was pretty interesting that they could do that. Pretty cool.
We got to drop an image of Simon into the Facebook post for this episode.
Absolutely.
It's I don't know. I mean, by today's standards, it's rudimentary, to say the least.
Yes.
But back then, I mean, I imagine it was pretty incredible. You know, mobile device, as mobile devices were in 1992.
Right. Yeah. Then still archaic by any means, and
For
so.
sure.
But pretty interesting to come up with that. So pretty wild. Did you see it, Steve?
Yeah.
Did you Google it? It's wild to think about how far it's come. You know what I mean?
I don't think I've ever seen this before.
I hadn't either. That was a new one to me. So pretty wild. So
Cool.
yeah, pretty cool. So a couple of other things that were notable for the technology of 1992 is this was the first year that dial-up internet became mainstream. It was the first time that it was used. It was used between two companies, Pipex in the UK and Sprint in the US. And so, in fact, before this, or at the time of the dial-up, only 2% of the U.S. population was even online on the internet.
Wow.
So hopefully kind of pushing things forward to be able to do that. So now I kind of take a divergence. So Sprint, right? So do you know where Sprint's name came from?
Some people run into eating telephones. I don't know.
I think if they would rethink it, that's what it would be. So I got to call this out for my dad. So the Sprint was a company that was joint between a telephone company in I think it was in Ohio. I can't remember exactly for sure, maybe Kansas. But anyway, so it was that company and the Southern Pacific Railroad. So the Southern Pacific Railroad at the time used a lot of telegraphy with lines that they ran along their railroad lines. And so it actually was the largest network of telegraphs in the country. And so they decided to merge, and by using that, decided to create bandwidth for telephones, long distance, and the like. And so Sprint stands for Southern Pacific Railroad International Networking Telephony.
How
So
about that?
it was created by the Southern Pacific Railroad. Pretty wild,
Never,
huh?
never knew that that was an acronym for something. I
Yeah.
just thought it was like Steve suggested, like some. It just, I mean, it's speed, so that's kind of what I
Yeah.
figured it was about. But
Yeah, but
yeah,
no, I remember my dad telling me about it, like when it was just getting formed, because he was an engineer for the Southern Pacific and building some of these lines. So yeah,
Brown Telephone Company,
yeah,
founded in 1899 in the rural area of Kansas. It's called Abilene,
Kansas, yeah, Kansas.
Abilene, Kansas. So interesting. Never
So
knew
between
that.
the two of them, so yeah, in the original Sprint logos, the SP is cursive and the rest is bold, so you can see the Southern Pacific,
Huh,
and so pretty cool. So yeah, anyway, I had to go on a divergent there just to call out to my dad. So
that's awesome.
Nice.
yeah, so fun, but good, interesting to do dial up. And again, we talked about this a couple episodes. I think I mentioned it. One of the sounds of our generation is the sound of dial up internet. So a couple of other things that came out that I thought were interesting. Twain. Twain was a standard interface for scanning equipment. And so it was a consortium consisting of reps from Eastman, Kodak, Hewlett Packard, Logitech, and Aldus. And so they created a standard for scanning and sending files. And so if you're not sure, fax technology and scanning was actually the predominant form of electronic communication at the time. And again, in the 1995 episode is when we said that email started to be using. But because of imaging and all of that type of thing, fax technology was really king at the time of this going on. So pretty interesting about all of that starting to come together. So a couple of other things, speaking of trying to get email going, this was when the MIME format, the multi-purpose internet mail extension, was defined and created. So this was basically allowing you to use extensions within email. Noel, you probably know more about this than I do. You want to expand on that at all?
Nope.
No. Okay, fair enough.
I'm still stuck on Twain. Hold on.
So yeah, so pretty interesting that all of these, like I said, all of these standards. So like, there's a lot of ideas going out there, but in order to make it useful, you've got to standardize. I kind of think of it like the Bitcoin and all this crypto of today, and there's so much out there. It's you've got to have kind of a standard to move forward. And even Netflix, but when we were talking about Netscape and Internet Explorer and all these, you had to have a format that was going to be usable for everybody going forward. Of course, there's different products, but you've got to have something. And it's really funny to see how quickly these things are developing in this year, and the things that they're trying to do to make that work. So pretty interesting. So couple of other things that were going on. December 3rd was a really interesting time, kind of bridging yesterday to today. So the first SMS text message is sent. So Neil Papworth, who is a 22-year-old engineer, used a personal computer to send a text message via Vodafone network to a phone of a colleague. Can you guess what the first text message ever was?
I'm gonna guess, Watson, can you read this?
Not quite.
It's around. It's in December.
Yeah. Noel's Googling. He can't answer this.
Merry Christmas.
There you go.
There you go, Steve.
Noel always takes the fun out because he Googles everything.
The research department just slid me a note.
That's pretty good, man. They're fat. They're so on top of things.
They really are.
Boy,
I'm
so proud of them.
Crack team of research professionals. Those guys.
They are.
Girls. Jeez.
All sorts. We don't discriminate here. So
that's interesting, though.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So Merry Christmas is the first ever text message. Wow.
Yep.
So interesting. And I was talking a little bit about IBM and doing the thing. So one of their launches, this was the year that their famous ThinkPads were introduced. Mm-hmm. So we talked about the price of, this is what research department needs to research this real quick while I'm introducing this. So we need to know how much the ThinkPad was priced for in 1992. So we knew in your technology episode, Steve, of 1988, the most. Oh no, it was yours, Noel, right? Which was the technology? What was the most expensive? It was the.
It was $4,200 for the
$4,200. Yeah. So I'm curious to know what the IBM ThinkPads cost is. So if you can find that in 1992, research department, do your thing.
They are doing their thing. I can hear the wheels spinning right now as they're running down the hallway with the answer in their hand. And so here it is.
They're out of wind, out of breath.
Just been handed me this piece of paper from them.
When did they send a text?
Because they're pretending it's 1992. They'd have to
Oh,
send it by
yeah, yeah.
computer,
The
Anyway.
original 1992 ThinkPad went for $4,350 in 1992.
So
Wow.
prices really didn't come down.
It's a staggering $7,589 in today's money. So
Wow.
that's a lot of nickels, man.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. I was curious if the price had gone down any from the first ones, but that really kind of held the same amount, right?
Yes, it did.
I'm sure that like technologically had more memory and probably
Oh, I'm
like
sure.
a lot
Yeah.
more than 4 years prior.
Yep.
Yeah. It was actually an innovative track pointing device and a 10.4-inch color thin film transistor display. So definitely a lot more innovative than what it was just a few years back. And that's what's so crazy about this. The speed of technology is starting to fly already at this. I mean, we can't keep up with it right now, but the speed of technology then was already there. A couple of other things that were interesting breakthroughs. The ATM was now, as of 1992, universally commonplace in most countries. So up until 1992, there were a few places you could use ATMs, but now worldwide it became a thing to be able to get your money at your convenience and pay a surcharge. I mean, can you imagine not being able to have that convenience?
You just brought back a memory for me. I don't know what it was. I know it was before 92, but we lived in Victoria, so it was probably early 80s. And I remember the first ATM we ever went to was called a Transact machine.
A Transact, okay.
It was actually a room. You walked in, it was air conditioned, but it was like in the middle of this parking lot. I was from Walmart in Victoria, Texas. And anyway, so to have an ATM in Victoria was a big deal. And so the Transact company, as you had your first visit to the ATM, their Transact machine, they would give you a scoop of mint chocolate chip ice cream.
Oh, nice.
I don't know why I remember this, but I still love mint chocolate chip. That's probably the first time I ever had it. I still love it to this day because of that Transact machine.
Steve has this unexplained hunger for ice cream when he goes to the ATM machine.
Gosh.
Why?
Everything reminds me of something with sugar in it.
Hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes the world go around, doesn't it?
Yeah. Walking to the car. Hey, ice cream sounds good.
You know what this could use? A dessert.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's awesome. Okay. That's what makes the world go around. So, So three more things, and then we'll wrap this episode up. So the first SanDisk, which then later on became SanDisk, created the first solid state drive in 1992. So they were looking for a way to create an alternative over the moving parts of the hard drives as formerly done. So the first solid state drive was created and then two more things that I think are a lot of fun and really relevant to the day. So in 1992, I believe it was in June, the first game with ray casting on May 5th of 1992. Then the first game using ray casting was Castle Wolfenstein 3D. And This is a significant game because it was really the first game that was the first person shooter type game. Okay. And so I remember playing it, and I remember playing the original Wolfenstein on my Apple. We talked about my Apple IIc, right, in previous games. So I remember playing Castle Wolfenstein on my Apple IIc, monochrome green and black monitor, and it was a top-down look where you see this looked like the duck that was moving around the screen, but it was a military soldier that was trying to escape this German fortress, right? And I always remember playing that game going, how cool would that be to see? And then they came out with this thing, and I mean, it revolutionized everything. I mean, you think from then Doom came out. I mean, you think about, we play Call of Duty, we play Fortnite, we play all of these games now, Halos, these games that are all these first person shooter type games. And it really originated in 1992 with the launch of Castle Wolfenstein 3D. So it may not seem significant, but it is. It's a massively significant thing in the way people game today. And it's fun. There's some new Wolfenstein games that have come out in the last few years, and there's an Easter egg for this. So if you go in a certain place, you can play the original Wolfenstein game from 1992 inside the Xbox. It's kind of cool. So a little Easter egg in there. So kind of fun there.
Y'all remember the game Gauntlet when you said?
I loved Gauntlet. Yes.
warrior needs food badly.
That's pretty
one,
good.
that game, I don't know how many. I've dumped a lot of quarters in that game. There was a Mazio's Pizza in Waco, Texas. I used to. Man, you talk about memories, man. They had Spy Hunter and they had
Oh
Gauntlet.
man.
Oh my gosh, man. I don't remember eating anything. I just remember playing video games, and they had a Coke machine, and you could go back and get like this cup. It was a Mazio's cup. You could go back, and as long as you had the cup, you could go into Mazio's and get Coke.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I mean, I'd go in there, grab some Dr. Pepper, have like a couple dollars, and I'd play Gauntlet until I couldn't play anymore. But oh man, warrior needs food badly.
I remember that.
I love Spy Hunter. I laid down the oil slicks constantly.
Oh yeah, me too. I always felt so cool. Oil slick and then like turbo. You know.
Yeah.
Then smoke screen.
And the smoke screen.
Smoke screen, man.
I don't know how many quarters I wore out with that game. Oh my gosh.
Geez. Anyway,
between that and Dragon's Lair, I think I used the most quarters in those two games. Did y'all play Dragon's Lair?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
In the basement of Baylor University at their student center way back in the days when I first saw that game, and I thought there's nothing cooler than Dragon's Lair. Like nothing will ever be more realistic. I mean, it was like blew your mind. It looked like you're playing a cartoon.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But
it is wild.
Now look at it.
Yeah.
So.
I saw a game. There's a YouTube video about the making of that game, and interestingly, they drew it just like a cartoon, like frame by frame and everything. Yeah. That's just wild. Yeah, but like so realistic. I remember watching that. And I remember I think it was the first game that you either had to pay like 50 cents or $1 instead of just a quarter. Yes. And I was like, no problem.
Yeah. But
I remember my aunt, when we go on vacation, she knew I loved video games. And so I think I might have told this story in my interview thing, but San Diego, there was a place that we used to always go to vacation there. And that's where I discovered Dragon's Lair, was at that place. And my aunt would always send me with a roll of quarters because she knew I'd like to go find the cool video game places in California, wherever we went on vacation. And I remember I probably went through that roll of quarters in maybe 15 minutes on that game alone. And it was like, came back and like there was like the agony of defeat with the tail between my legs, like I'm already out of quarters, Dad. You know?
Have you guys been to like a retro arcade? Like they've got retro arcades. Have you ever been to one of those?
I need to do that.
I haven't.
Steve?
No.
Oh my gosh. Find one. I'm sure, Steve, there's probably one around you.
I'm sure.
Keith, I doubt there's one where you live, but
no, it's called the Current Arcade here.
But it is. There's one in the Woodlands, and
yeah, you were talking about that one.
Oh my gosh, awesome. Man! You pay $10, you can play all day. And
so, what are some games in there that you can recall?
Track and field is.
Oh, there you go.
And then, of course, like the excuse me while I die. Galaga, Defender, pole position. I mean, you name it, man. They have all of it. And my older brother Steve came down from. He came down sometime in the fall last year. And I took him there, and I mean, we had the best time, man. We didn't have enough time. We could have stayed there all day, but I think we only had like a couple hours, man. It's awesome. So if you really want to, like, if you have old games you love to play, there's probably retro arcade somewhere around you, because I've seen them in Austin. Houston. I know there's bound to be one in Dallas, Fort Worth area somewhere.
Oh,
but
I've seen
several.
Yeah.
Find it and go. It is so fun. You talk about a trip down memory lane, man. It's awesome. So
that's awesome.
Little plug for the retro arcades these days. Pretty awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Is it like owned? Is it a corporate owned, or is it locally owned? Okay.
This one's locally owned. The one that won the Woodlands is locally owned.
You need to get that person. You need to interview him.
Totally.
That would be awesome.
I think it's a great idea. I was really worried about them not making it through the pandemic, but they made it. But man, I was worried of, like, I thought about them during the pandemic. I'm like, man, nobody's going to go there. Nobody's going to go.
Yeah. Touching everything. No way.
Yeah. Geez. But they made it.
That's awesome. So last two things. So the first one is going to be something that I will tee up. Who's doing movies?
Not me.
Either one of you?
That'll be probably a mashup.
Okay, mashup. So I'll tee this up for the mashup. So because of the cost of the computer generated graphics, the movie of the year that everybody will remember was made for $100 million. It was a record $100 million to make this movie, which is the most money ever create or spent on a movie at that time. And it was mostly due to the expense of computer generated special effects, such as image morphing throughout the film. So I'm going to tee that up. I'm not going to say what the movie is. Stay tuned to our mashup to know which movie in 1992 released was made for $100 million, mostly due to the technology of the day and the expense of it. So I'll leave that there.
Can we make a guess?
Yeah, take a guess.
I'm going to say
without Googling, Noel.
I'm not Googling.
I'm going to say Jurassic Park.
Okay, close,
but I might be
but
premature.
Not quite. It was a little premature, close, but not quite. But these were the movies that, like this and Jurassic Park and all of those, was actually what made George Lucas say, okay, it's time to make more Star Wars films. So this was a precursor to that. Noel, do you have a guess?
No.
I Googled.
I Googled, so no,
okay.
I don't have a guess.
Okay. So are you saying after this you'll be back?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the movie?
It would be that would be Terminator 2.
Terminator 2, which I think is one of the coolest movies ever.
It really
Love
is.
that movie.
It really is.
I remember watching that movie just with my jaw on the floor watching that
Amazing.
show. It was so freaking good. So
the first Terminator was good, but I was like, Terminator 2 just blew it away. Like the technology that they had back then, that was insane.
Yeah,
so.
I don't think there's one better. I think that's still the one that sets the stage for me. So
totally.
Did you see that one, Steve?
I can't remember.
You don't remember that one?
It doesn't stand out to me. So.
Oh wow! Yeah, because that was also the one where they simulated. Is one of the speaking of Oppenheimer coming out right now, it's one of the top 10 most realistic nuclear bomb events in any movie. And so the way that they recreated a nuclear event in that flashback scene or a dream scene is always mentioned as one of the most realistic nuclear explosions that a movie has made. So pretty interesting.
That's
so
cool.
pretty cool.
Cyberdyne
Industries, and kind of funny that it's one of many films that critique civilization's frequent blind trust to AI and technology. Kind of relevant today, isn't it?
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Like I can't even imagine. So, and how do we do it? By surfing the internet, and that's the last thing I'm going to talk about. In 1992 February, computer scientist Mark McCahill coined the phrase "surfing the internet," and so the rest is history. So. That's my walk down. There is a ton more. You can get into the weeds in 1992 of supercomputers, all sorts of stuff. So I encourage you to do so. Boston Dynamics was something that came out at that point, now owned by Google, but a lot of neat things. That was a spinoff of MIT robotics, interestingly enough. So a lot of neat things in 1992. We could go on for years and years, but what I really wanted to do is highlight what I thought were the top events and top things introduced in that year.
And with that, I am back in the present. So, what's next on the agenda? Who is up?
It's all Noel.
Okay. Since that, I feel like somebody's shoved me in the back and pushed me forward. Yes, I'll go. No, I'll be talking about the 1992, the sports of 1992. So, a couple of interesting. I'll give you a little teaser here. So. There was a particular rule change made that allowed professional sports teams allowed players from professional sports teams to participate in the Olympics. And that one rule change gave the world the greatest basketball team of all time. So awesome. I will talk about the Dream Team in the next episode in some depth, because it was really something. So anyway,
absolutely.
Little
Super
teaser.
You get to talk about that.
I know.
Steve is like the one time I don't draw sports.
I've only had it once.
I know you need to cheat the system.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'm a man of integrity. So.
I'll tell you what, I really loved your integrity of removing the politics from the drawing.
Yeah. By the way, there's no way I could put Keith through having to do world politics and current events ever again.
And I can't thank you enough. Feel free to burn that sheet.
Keith, nice job on doing the 1992 technology.
It was a fun year to review.
It's amazing what we learn in each of these years, and
it's crazy
to have a jump 4 years later from 1988 technology, see how much things changed in just 4 years is just amazing. So
everything's changed, but the prices.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that. Hey, everybody, please tune in next week for 1992 sports and let hear Noel talk about how Larry Bird led the Dream Team to to the gold medal. I can't wait for us to talk about that.
Yeah, his name might come up. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, well, everybody have a great day. Thanks for listening. Please download every single episode you listen to. We appreciate it. It helps us out and helps us get the attention that our podcast would love to have. So everybody have a great day, and we'll see you all next time soon.
See you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Wayback Chronicles. All shows are written and produced by Noel, Keith, and Steve. Massive thanks to those who made these memories possible for us through the years. All songs, sounds, and effects have been attributed in the comments section and through links listed on waybackchronicles.podbean.com. We look forward to taking you way back again in the very near future.